What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to take a look at the Black Myth Wukong benchmarking tool. Game Science provided this so that we can test our hardware. That's what we're going to do. I'll be using my RTX 4090 Ryzen 7800X 3D build, and we're going to take a look at a few different settings. This video will focus entirely on 4K, and if we briefly take a look at the settings, we have DLSS, TSR, and FSR and XeSS. FSR also has frame generation, which is great. On top of that, we have a super resolution slider, so you don't have to choose quality, balance. You can do whatever you want. So that's what we're going to take a look at as well. We're also going to take a look at the graphical presets and compare and see what type of performance we can claw back by reducing the graphical presets. It's not going to be a crazy in-detail look, but I will provide a bunch of information as much as I can. We'll also test out ray tracing off and on, and even reduce it to medium as well, because this game is quite a bit demanding. So let's not waste any more time and dive straight into it. For the first test, what I wanted to do was test out the different presets without ray tracing enabled, and we're going to use DLAA, so native 4K. We'll test out the cinematic preset, very high preset, and high preset. And here we go, guys. On the left, we have the cinematic preset, the highest. Very high is in the middle, and high is on the right. Now, if you compare cinematic to very high, there isn't a massive difference, and I think image quality actually looks very comparable. However, once you drop over to high, we gain a pretty nice boost to the FPS. And I would say that overall it doesn't look that bad, although it does look noticeably worse. The biggest problem and issue I have with it is the level of pop-in. There's actually quite a bit of pop-in. If we skip ahead a little bit, past the river here, you can see on the ground that you got a lot of pop-in, whether it be shadows or grass. Now there is a setting on there that is the view distance, so you could technically mix and match settings, and that is something I'll probably dive deeper into when the game comes out, probably. But for now, I just wanted to test out the presets, and the reason for it is that I'm looking to claw back performance, and I think very high is actually what I'm gonna probably go with. Cinematic is it looks almost identical to very high, and there is no pop-in in very high. So we're going to focus with very high. I mean, you can tell that this game's been built with future hardware in mind, which I think is actually great. That's how PC games should be built. But I think we're in a good position to try out some DLSS quality here. Let's do that. Now we're going to stick with a very high preset, like I said, and to do DLSS quality, we're just going to put the super resolution slider to 67. That's 67%. That's supposed to be DLSS quality, and it even tells you on the right that it is that, okay? What we've done here is I've put on DLSS quality on the left and DLSS quality with frame generation on the right. We averaged, I think, 51 FPS with a very high preset. Turning on DLSS sees about a 50% increase to that, and turning on frame generation as well on top sees a 100% gain in FPS averages, right? 51 FPS, 72 with DLSS quality, and 106 with DLSS quality and frame generation. That's a pretty nice gain, right? One thing that kind of stands out to me with Unreal Engine 5 games, and this is something that all Unreal Engine 5 games kind of deal with, is if you look at the shadows, there is a bit of flickering. Now, I get it as far as like trees and branches shadows. Even in real life, they kind of flicker a bit. Not flicker, but you know, trees move. So they're not like stationary completely. But I don't know, it's just something about it that kind of stands out to me. But anyway, this concludes our non-ray trace look at this benchmark. Now, speaking of ray tracing, we're going to go ahead and turn that on next and see how that changes things. It's definitely going to impact the performance. Obviously, that's not a surprise to anybody, but I would say DLSS quality, as far as the super resolution aspect of it, does a really good job. I don't see any ghosting, and DLSS frame generation looks great. I don't see any ghosting either. And as far as my own personal standards, I like to be able to get at least 60 FPS before I turn on frame generation. Maybe 50 FPS is kind of my minimum, right? So this benchmark is going to kind of evolve around my personal preferences, if that makes any sense. But anyway, let's take a look at ray tracing. Alright guys, so here we go. We're going to make a comparison of rasterization versus ray tracing. On the left, we have very high graphical preset with ray tracing off and DLSS quality. And on the right, we have ray tracing on very high with DLSS quality. And right away, I can notice that the shadows are way better with ray tracing. They're a lot more accurate, and that flicker is gone, which is a huge improvement because like I mentioned previously, that was one of the things that stands out to me. Obviously, look at that rock face back there, how much it flickers and how blurry it is without ray tracing. And then with ray tracing, it's much better, much more defined. But the reflections are also better with ray tracing as well. They're definitely more accurate, more detailed. And you'll see here this guy carrying a torch. The torch will have reflections with ray tracing enabled, whereas with ray tracing disabled, there is no such reflections. Although the reflections with ray tracing disabled still look actually pretty good. I mean, you can see the tree trunks and the rocks and everything looks pretty good. But with the ray tracing enabled is definitely a lot more accurate. Now, is that worth it? I don't know. But you also have ray trace caustics, water caustics, I believe, as well. That's why the water looks a little bit different as well. I believe this game also has direct illumination, which you can actually kind of see it in the ambient occlusion. It's like the global illumination is also affecting the color of the ambient occlusion a bit as well. So I'll have to look at this in a bit more detail, but these are the things that stand out to me kind of right away just by looking at it. Ray tracing takes it to that next level at a high performance cost, of course. But then again, this is with DLSS quality. We have DLSS balance, we have frame generation, so we have a lot of things we can do. But you can see, like this pillar here, it's with ray tracing, the ambient global illumination definitely affects the color of it as well. So very nice, actually. Ray tracing is looks very good in this game at a performance cost. But anyway, let's try to make some tweaks to the ray tracing and see if we can gain some more performance. Okay guys, so before we take a look at frame generation, I wanted to compare ray tracing very high on the left versus ray tracing medium on the right. Right away, the reflections are definitely nerfed with ray tracing medium. They're a lot more blurry. However, the shadow improvements are actually still there with ray tracing set to medium, which is actually nice. But I feel like the reflections, I mean, look at the rocks reflected on the water, how much blurrier they are with ray tracing set to medium. Like, I feel that if the ray trace reflections were completely removed and they just had the regular reflections, you know, that you have with rasterization only, but you were to keep the global illumination or shadows that you get with ray tracing very high, I feel that would be a pretty nice combo. Because look at our performance right now, right? By turning ray tracing to medium, we gain a huge amount of frame rate, right? We're averaging 44 FPS with ray tracing on very high, and we're averaging 57 FPS with ray tracing set to medium. So while we lose the reflection quality that ray tracing provides versus no ray tracing, we do gain on those nice, crisp, very accurate shadows. So this is actually quite interesting. I kind of wish that they had split all the ray traced effects instead of just making, you know, like a toggle, for example, medium, very high. I wish they had put on like ray trace shadows, ray trace reflections, ray trace GI, ray trace water caustics. I think that would have been a better choice. But it is what it is. I wanted to kind of show you this because I felt it was important to differentiate between very high and medium. There are differences, mostly on the reflections from what I can tell. But anyway, let's see what we can gain if we turn on frame generation with ray tracing. Alright, so here we go guys. Now we're going to test out frame generation. On the left we have very high ray tracing with DLSS quality, and on the right we have the same but with frame generation on top. Now this is an insane amount of FPS gain, guys. I've never seen this much gain in FPS with frame generation. I mean, we're averaging 44 FPS on the left, and we're averaging 72 FPS with frame generation on. That's like a 70% gain almost in FPS. I've never seen that much gain with DLSS frame generation. So does that mean that, if implemented properly, DLSS frame generation can be a lot more effective? Maybe. But again, our base frame rate is in the mid to high 40s. Personally, I don't know how that would feel playing a game like this. Of course, we can't test that because this is a built-in on-rails benchmark, but it's kind of interesting. What I think we should test, however, is DLSS balance, because DLSS quality already looks very good. Let's take a look at DLSS balance and DLSS balance with frame generation on top. I bet you that's going to be a really nice game. Let's take a look at that. Alrighty guys, so here we go. DLSS set to balance with very high graphical preset and very high maxed out ray tracing on the left. And we have the same thing on the right, but with frame generation enabled. So we've now gotten closer to that 60 FPS base just by dropping from DLSS quality to balance. Whereas previously we were averaging 45 FPS, we're now at 56 FPS by dropping to balance. And again, we see a very nice FPS gain by turning on frame generation. That's around 33 FPS higher, and it's a little bit less than 70%, but it's around that same area. So very nice gains, guys. And I have to say, I mean, this looks very good. DLSS balance still looks pretty much almost just as good as DLSS quality. I mean, I would say it pretty much looks the same. I'll do another side-by-side at the end because we're reaching the end of the video here. But I'll do one for you guys, and you guys can look at it yourselves and see if there's any noticeable differences. But to me, the game still looks just as good. And yeah, I think this would probably be the way to play this game personally, if you wanted to go for that visual setup, basically. You can go with 4K, very high preset, very high ray tracing, and DLSS balanced with frame generation. I think you could even go with the cinematic preset, actually, because the difference in FPS wasn't actually that big. I was just trying to squeeze out as much performance as I could. But I think there's room here to tweak the settings even further, because I think you could drop from very high to high in some of the graphical settings. Just leave the view distance to high, because you don't want that popping. But I think the ray tracing in this game really significantly improves the shadows. And that is very, very important, at least to me, because I find that Unreal Engine 5 flicker without the ray tracing to be rather distracting. So for me, I hope the developers can add just a ray trace setting where I can keep the global shadows on, and that would be great for me. The reflections, I think the basic one looks all right. So yeah, very interesting numbers. Very scalable, actually. Alright guys, so as a little bonus, I'll leave you with DLSS quality and frame generation on the left versus DLSS balance and frame generation on the right. And you guys can judge for yourself, see if you notice any noticeable differences. To me, they both actually look very similar. And I'm pretty close to my 4K TV. That's not to say that there isn't any noticeable differences, but I don't really notice any ghosting or anything like that, which is normally what stands out when you drop from DLSS quality to balance. So I think this looks actually really good at 4K with DLSS set to balance and ray tracing maxed out. The game looks absolutely gorgeous. But that'll conclude my video. I wanted to squeeze in as much as I could and provide as much information as I could and share my thoughts with you guys, which is actually ray tracing does a really good job in this game, mostly with the global illumination and the shadows. It actually looks much better than with ray tracing disabled, in my opinion. But that'll be it. That's my thoughts. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think about it. You don't have to agree, just share how you feel. That's perfectly fine. We all have different preferences, and that's all right. That's what PC gaming is all about, baby. But anyway, leave a comment down below, give the video a like if you liked it, and consider subscribing if you want to see similar content. And I will see you when this game drops. I can't wait to play it. Peace.